The morning air was still cold enough to sting my bare ankles as I stood in my backyard in a pair of flannel pajamas, hands wrapped around a mug that had already gone lukewarm. Dawn was just beginning to soften the sky, that pale gray blue that makes everything feel unfinished, like the world hasn't quite decided what kind of day it's going to be yet. Beyond the edge of my lawn, past the line where the grass gave way to dirt and fallen leaves, a construction crew was already at work. The growl of machinery cut through the quiet, metal teeth biting into old wood that had stood there longer than most of the houses in Riverside Meadows. The bridge was coming down. Splinters cracked and fell into the shallow ravine below as a man in a hard hat guided an excavator with the casual confidence of someone who believed this was all routine, all authorized. A few feet away, standing well clear of the debris, was a woman in a navy blazer and pressed slacks, her arms folded as she supervised the destruction like a general surveying a battlefield she was certain she'd already won. Even from where I stood, I could tell she was pleased with herself. Ramona Prescott always was when she thought she'd finally forced someone into compliance. She didn't look back toward my house. She didn't need to. In her mind, this was the final act of a long, tedious dispute. The HOA had flexed its authority. The defiant homeowner had been dealt with. Order, as she defined it, had been restored. What she didn't know, what none of the contractors knew as they reduced that old wooden span to broken boards and dust, was that the bridge didn't belong to me. It didn't belong to the HOA. It never had. It belonged to the county. And as I stood there watching each plank fall, every bolt torn free, I felt something close to calm settle over me. Not triumph exactly. More like inevitability. This moment had been coming for months, ever since Ramona decided that the rules mattered more than reality, that her authority extended as far as her confidence could carry it. This was simply the point where her certainty collided with facts she could no longer ignore. 3 months earlier, that bridge had been nothing more than a quiet, familiar presence at the edge of my property. I'd never thought much about it. It was just there, the way some things always seem to be, like the sound of wind in the trees or the way the trail dipped slightly before rising into the forest beyond. It was old, weathered, but solid, its wooden planks smoothed by decades of footsteps. Kids from the neighborhood used it to explore. Joggers crossed it in the mornings. Hikers used it as an entry point to the county forest trails that stretched for miles beyond our development. When I bought the house back in 2015, the bridge had been mentioned almost in passing during the walkthrough. That's part of the county trail system, the realtor said, gesturing vaguely toward the trees. It's been there forever. There was no drama attached to it, no warnings or caveats. It was just another feature of the land, like the slope of the yard or the stand of oaks that turned brilliant orange every fall. Riverside Meadows itself had seemed like a good choice at the time. Quiet streets, modest homes, a community that valued appearances but didn't feel oppressive. The HOA existed, of course, but it was mild, almost invisible. Dues were reasonable. Rules were enforced with a light touch. Most of the board members were retirees or longtime residents who treated the role like volunteer work, not a power position. That all changed the year Ramona Prescott became president. She arrived at her first meeting in a tailored suit, carrying a leather binder and speaking in the clipped, polished tones of someone who'd spent years in corporate management. From the start, she talked about streamlining enforcement and eliminating inconsistencies. Rules, to her, weren't guidelines meant to keep the neighborhood pleasant. They were tools. Levers to pull. Lines to draw. At first, the changes were subtle. More notices went out. Language in emails became colder, more legalistic. Then fines started appearing for things that had never been issues before: a trash bin left out too long, a fence post a shade off from the approved pallet. Some residents grumbled, but most complied. Ramona thrived on compliance. The bridge didn't enter her orbit until one afternoon when I was trimming back some overgrown branches near the edge of my yard. She approached with a clipboard tucked under her arm, heels sinking slightly into the soft ground. "Is this structure on your property?" she asked, not bothering with small talk. I followed her gaze to the bridge. "No," I said. "It's county land. Public right-of-way." She frowned, the way people do when they hear something that doesn't align with what they've already decided. "According to our maps, that area falls within the HOA boundary." "I'd be surprised," I replied. "The county maintains it. Always has." She made a note on her clipboard. "We'll be looking into it." That was the beginning. A week later, I received a formal compliance notice in my mailbox. It was printed on HOA letterhead, stamped and signed, demanding proof of approval or ownership for the bridge. The language was firm, bordering on accusatory, as if the burden of explanation rested entirely on me. I wasn't worried. My professional background had trained me for situations exactly like this. As a forensic accountant, I'd built a career on untangling records, tracing ownership, following paper trails to their logical conclusions. This was child's play by comparison. I went online and pulled county property records. I dug through archived plats and easements, scanned yellow documents that predated the neighborhood by decades. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. In 1979, the county had established a public right-of-way through what was then undeveloped land, granting access to forest trails and conservation areas. The bridge was part of that system, built and maintained by the county long before Riverside Meadows existed as an idea on a developer's drawing board. I printed everything. Maps. Deeds. Maintenance logs. I organized it neatly and submitted it to the HOA, confident that once faced with official documentation, Ramona would back down. She didn't. Instead, she called an emergency HOA meeting. The notice went out to the entire neighborhood, warning of a potential safety hazard and an unauthorized structure. When I arrived at the meeting, the room was packed. Ramona stood at the front, a projector behind her displaying grainy photos of the bridge taken from odd angles that made it look rickety and dangerous. She spoke with conviction, framing the issue as one of liability and community safety. She held up a hand-drawn map, an internal HOA diagram that conveniently placed the bridge squarely within association boundaries. When it was my turn to speak, I stayed calm. I presented the county records, explaining the history of the right-of-way, the legal basis for county ownership. A longtime neighbor backed me up, recalling how the bridge had always been there, always been public. Ramona dismissed it all with a wave of her hand. Our internal records take precedence, she said. We can't rely on outdated county documents. The board voted. 30 days to remove the bridge or face enforcement action. After that, things got uglier. Ramona took to the neighborhood social media page, posting vague warnings about non-compliant homeowners and serious safety risks. The comments piled on. Speculation. Judgment. I said nothing publicly. Instead, I documented everything. Screenshots. Emails. Dates and times. Another letter arrived, threatening to hire contractors and bill me thousands. I replied politely, acknowledging receipt, stating my position, and nothing more. Behind the scenes, I prepared. I installed a camera overlooking the bridge. I contacted the county, alerting them to the dispute. Then I waited. Ramona, confident in her authority, didn't wait. She moved quickly, eager to assert control before anyone could stop her. Which is how I found myself standing in my backyard at dawn, watching a bridge that had stood for decades come crashing down. As the last support beam snapped and the excavator backed away, Ramona finally turned and saw me. For a moment, something flickered across her face, surprise, maybe, or annoyance. She squared her shoulders and walked off without a word. I took one last sip of my cold coffee and went inside to make a call. The county answered on the first ring. By the end of the week, everything changed. The HOA's authority was questioned. Ramona's decisions were scrutinized. Lawyers got involved. Fines were discussed, not mine but hers. The bridge would be rebuilt, stronger than before, at the county's expense. Ramona Prescott would no longer be HOA president. And I learned something valuable in the process. Patience, when paired with facts, is far more powerful than anger.